I want open diplomatic communication channels with humans." The statement hung in the moistened air of our atmospheric chamber like a forbidden utterance. Vex's respiratory membranes fluttered rapidly, a sign of nervousness I had rarely observed in my former student. I kept my own membranes deliberately still despite the shock that coursed through my neural pathways. "You cannot be serious," I said finally, my voice modulator set to its lowest frequency. "The consortium has forbidden direct communication with humans for 7 galactic cycles, which is precisely why I've come to you, Elder Nithal." Bekazara moved closer, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing with excitement beneath his translucent exoskeleton. "You're the only consortium historian who has studied human history extensively. You understand them better than anyone else in our quadrant." I adjusted my sensory appendages, extending them to absorb the full spectrum of Vexa's emotional emanations. The chamber's mist swirled around us, rich with the nutrient particles we both absorbed through our dermal layers. The soft glow from the living architecture cast Vexa's form in an almost ethereal light, highlighting the youthful inexperience in his posture. "Understanding humans through historical archives and engaging with them directly are fundamentally different matters," I said. "We do not communicate with humans for the same reason we do not ignite plasma in a methane atmosphere. The consequences are predictable and devastating." Vexa's bioluminescence dimmed slightly. "But the archives are incomplete. The official records only state that humans are incompatible with galactic harmony, without explanation. What aren't we being told?" I moved toward the memory pool at the center of the chamber, my appendages trailing through the liquid interface. The pool rippled in response, displaying fragments of data, star charts, xenobiological diagrams, historical timelines. "It is not a question of information being withheld, but of wisdom being respected," I said. "The rule of separation exists for our protection." "From what?" Vexa pressed, joining me by the pool's edge. "Humans are technologically inferior, biologically fragile, and confined to a single star system. What could possibly justify their complete quarantine?" The memory pool responded to my unspoken command, dissolving the displayed data and returning to its neutral state. I had accessed these restricted archives many times during my 3-century tenure as consortium historian, but had never shared what I had learned with anyone. The burden of knowledge weighed heavily on me. "Did you know," I began carefully, "that humans are the only known sentient species that develop nuclear weapons before achieving reliable interplanetary travel?" "That speaks to poor judgment, certainly. But it speaks to something far more fundamental," I interrupted. "Humans pursue power before understanding consequences. They create tools of destruction as a priority, rather than as a reluctant necessity." Vexa's appendages twisted in the gesture of scholarly disagreement. "Many young species demonstrate aggression during early development. The Vrexa were brutal conquerors before their evolutionary enlightenment. The Vresadar conquered to secure resources," I said. "Humans," I paused, struggling to articulate the distinction. "Humans wage war against concepts." "I don't understand." I gestured toward the observation portal. Beyond the crystal membrane, the vast swirl of our galactic arm stretched across the void, countless stars cradling countless civilizations, all connected through the careful diplomacy of the consortium. "Most species fight over territory, resources, or occasionally social dominance," I explained. "Humans fight over ideas, invisible constructs existing only in their neurological patterns. They call these constructs freedom, justice, democracy, honor, faith. They will sacrifice millions of their own kind to defend or spread these abstractions." Vexa's sensory appendages contracted in disbelief. "That's not possible. No evolutionary path would select for such behavior." "And yet the historical evidence is irrefutable." I moved away from the observation portal, my locomotion appendages carrying me to the archive interface embedded in the chamber wall. "Tell me, in your studies of pre-consortium species, have you encountered any that deliberately develop thousands of extinction-level weapons, kept them ready for immediate use, and maintained this state for decades without deploying them? No, Vexeter admitted. Such a strategy would be evolutionarily unstable. Precisely, but humans call this strategy deterrence. They build weapons specifically not to use them, except they sometimes do, which introduces a game theory paradox no other species has ever considered logical. The nutrient mist in the chamber had thickened, responding automatically to my elevated stress levels. Vexeter absorbed this change, his posture shifting to one of greater receptivity. Elder Nethel, you speak as if humans operate outside rational behavior patterns, but if that were true, they would have destroyed themselves long ago. That is the central paradox of humanity, I said. They continuously approach self-destruction without quite achieving it. They thrive on the edge of annihilation in a way no other sentient species can comprehend. It makes them unpredictable. Vexer moved toward the chamber's data interface, his appendages hovering over the activation surface. I still don't understand why this justifies complete isolation. The consortium has integrated far more aggressive species. Aggression we can predict and manage, I said. What humans possess is something else entirely. During my 2 centuries of studying them, I have come to believe they possess a form of cognitive architecture fundamentally different from every other known sentient species. The data interface hummed to life under Vexer's touch. I've arranged temporary research clearance to view the restricted human archives, he said. I want to understand. I felt a ripple of apprehension course through my neural network. Vexer, once you access these archives, your perspective will be irreversibly altered. The consortium restricts this knowledge, not through fear of information spread, but because the psychological impact of understanding humans changes those who study them. How so? I approached the memory pool again, activating its deepest access protocols with a complex sequence of appendage movements. The pool surface darkened, then revealed a 3-dimensional projection of Earth, rotating slowly, because to study humans is to stare into evolutionary horror, I said quietly. They are the only known sentient species whose primary evolutionary advantage is their capacity to cause suffering in others. Vexer's bioluminescence pulsed with shock. That can't be possible. I will show you the historical record of an incident that occurred nearly 3 Earth centuries ago, I said. It was after this event that the consortium established the rule of separation. We had been observing humans for millennia, debating whether to initiate first contact. What we witnessed during this period ended that debate permanently. The memory pool's projection shifted, zooming in on Earth's northern hemisphere. The data streams began flowing into the reception chambers of our communication interfaces. This account begins with a human named William Taylor, I continued, as the projection focused on a single human settlement. He was neither particularly powerful nor unique among his kind. But what he and others like him did when given certain opportunities reveals why humans remain the only species in the known galaxy that we fear rather than merely avoid. I adjusted my posture, preparing for the extended historical narration. Are you certain you wish to proceed, Vexer? There is wisdom in accepting some rules without challenging their foundation. Vexier's determination remained undiminished. His appendages steady as they absorbed the preliminary data streams. I need to know, Elder. If I am to dedicate my research cycle to understanding galactic harmony, I must comprehend what threatens it most. I initiated the complete data transfer sequence, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility that came with sharing humanity's true nature. Very well, I said. Listen carefully to what I am about to tell you, and understand why we never, under any circumstances, engage in direct communication with humans. The memory pool surface rippled as the historical data flowed between us. Vexer's neural receptors widened to absorb the information stream, while I modulated the flow carefully. Too much exposure to human historical records at once could overwhelm even a seasoned xenohistorian. William Taylor was a communications specialist in what humans called their space program, I began. He worked at a remote signal monitoring station in a region humans named Alaska. This was approximately 122 Earth years ago, during a period when humans had only just begun reaching beyond their atmosphere in primitive vessels. The memory pool displayed images of a small cluster of structures nestled among snow-covered mountains, antennas pointed skyward. The consortium had been observing Earth for millennia, documenting human development with standard non-interference protocols. I continued, but the Vraxater Authority, not yet integrated into the consortium, had different methods. They believed in what they termed developmental acceleration of pre-interstellar species. Vexer's appendages twitched with recognition. The Vrexer acceleration controversy. We studied this in basic xenohistory, but the specific species was never identified in our curriculum. Intentionally omitted, I confirmed. The Vrekadar chose Earth as a test case. They deployed a deceleration field around the third planet in the human system, a standard tactic to contain potentially disruptive species. The field was designed to subtly inhibit certain technological advancements while the Vrekadar assessment team determined whether humans should be guided, contained, or, I paused, eliminated. The memory pool shifted to display a Vrex seed ship in orbit around Earth, nearly invisible to human detection systems of that era. The deceleration field had an unexpected effect, I said. Human electronic communications were disrupted in patterns that their scientists could detect but not explain. Several human nations interpreted these disruptions as deliberate interference by rival powers. Their global tensions escalated rapidly. I gestured toward the pool, and the image changed to show Taylor's monitoring station. William Taylor was not unique among his kind. He possessed average intelligence by human standards, and occupied a mid-level position in his organizational hierarchy. But Taylor had what humans call intuition, a remarkable ability to perceive patterns in sparse data that even our most sophisticated analytical systems struggle to replicate. The memory pool zoomed in on a human male with dark hair and what humans called a beard, studying equipment displays with intensity. Taylor noticed that the signal disruptions followed patterns inconsistent with any known human technology. While his superiors attributed the anomalies to equipment malfunctions, Taylor became convinced they were receiving deliberate communications from beyond their world. He was correct, though not in the way he imagined. What he detected were fluctuations in the Vrexater deceleration field. Agisur's respiratory membranes fluttered. But a deceleration field should be undetectable to pre-interstellar species. Precisely. This was the first indication that humans perceive reality differently than we had assumed. Taylor documented the patterns meticulously. Working alone after his superiors dismissed his theories, he developed a primitive algorithm to predict the fluctuations, essentially reverse engineering aspects of advanced Vrexater technology, using equipment barely capable of reaching their own moon. The pool displayed Taylor's handwritten equations and diagrams, stunningly sophisticated given his limited knowledge and resources. The Vrexater noticed this unexpected analysis and intensified their deceleration field, intending to render Taylor's equipment non-functional. This was standard containment protocol. What happened next contradicted every predictive model of pre-contact species behavior. I paused, allowing the nutrient mist to thicken around us. This part of the historical record always affected my neural patterns deeply. Rather than abandoning his work when his equipment failed, Taylor constructed his own receiving apparatus using discarded components and personal resources. He worked without official sanction, sleeping only briefly, sustaining himself on minimal nutrition. What humans call obsession drove him beyond normal biological limitations. The memory pool showed Taylor in his dwelling, surrounded by hand-built electronic equipment, walls covered with papers and diagrams, his appearance deteriorating from lack of self-maintenance. The Vrexater were fascinated by this persistence. They had never encountered a species that would prioritize backtrack knowledge over biological needs to this extent. They decided to test Taylor's capabilities by deliberately sending a simplified mathematical sequence through their field, a standard assessment protocol used with promising species. Vex's appendages trembled slightly. They initiated direct contact, without consortium approval. The Vrexator operated independently then, I reminded him. They expected Taylor would recognize the pattern as non-random but be unable to respond meaningfully. Instead, Taylor not only decoded the mathematical sequence, but replied with his own sequence, one that contained embedded information about Earth's physical constants, precisely the type of response the consortium's first contact protocols anticipate from advanced civilizations. The memory pool displayed Taylor's response sequence, remarkably elegant in its simplicity. The Vrexator assessment team was divided on how to proceed. Some advocated for immediate containment, arguing that Taylor represented an anomalous individual whose abilities threatened evaluation protocols. Others suggested accelerating the observation timeline to better understand human potential. While they deliberated, Taylor did something unprecedented. The pool shifted to display a different scene. Taylor traveling to a remote location carrying his equipment. Anticipating that his discovery might be suppressed or confiscated, Taylor created information packages about the signals and sent them to 19 other humans at different research institutions worldwide. Each package contained his data, methodology, and coordinates for directing receiving equipment. Taylor had independently invented a basic distributed research network, a concept that typically emerges centuries after interplanetary travel in most species. Vixer's bioluminescence pulsed with increasing intensity. How did one human recognize the need for such a strategy? The concept of information distribution as species survival insurance requires an evolutionary history of complex social deception. That, I said, is precisely what made the Vrexator uneasy. Humans evolved as both prey and predators, developing both concealment instincts and hunting strategies simultaneously. Their cognitive architecture contains inherent contradictions that our predictive models failed to accommodate. The memory pool displayed multiple locations around Earth where Taylor's information packages were received, examined, and replicated. Within 27 Earth days, scientists in 6 human nations were independently detecting and analyzing the Vrexator field fluctuations. The Vrexator realized their test had triggered a cascading information event and moved to the next phase of their protocol. They intensified the deceleration field to its maximum capacity, sufficient to temporarily disable all electronic technology on the planet, allowing time for the Vrexator to withdraw undetected. The pool showed the Vrexator seed ship adjusting its field emitters. What the Vrexator failed to anticipate was that humans had preserved and continued using pre-electronic technologies. When their electronic systems failed, human communications networks rapidly adapted to mechanical and chemical signaling methods. Information continued spreading through printed materials and analog transmission systems. The deceleration field couldn't affect. Images flowed through the pool, humans operating mechanical printing presses, using light signals from elevated positions, transmitting messages through systems of physical movement. The Vrexator had never encountered a species that maintained technological redundancy to this degree. Most species discard previous technologies when superior methods emerge. Humans, however, preserved earlier technologies, not from sentimentality as the Vrexator first assumed, but apparently from a deep-rooted anticipation of systemic failure. Vixier's sensory appendages contracted in what I recognized as surprise. They evolved expecting catastrophe. Their entire history is punctuated by civilizational collapses and recoveries. I confirmed. Preparation for disaster is embedded in their cognitive patterns. While the Vrexator deliberated their next action, humans around the planet were collaborating to identify the source of the technology disruption. Using only optical telescopes and mathematical analysis, they triangulated the position of the Vrexator seed ship in orbit. The memory pool displayed human astronomers comparing observations, calculating orbital parameters with primitive tools. The humans couldn't reach the Vexeter vessel, of course, but they didn't need to. William Taylor proposed a solution that demonstrated why humans remain quarantined to this day. I adjusted the pool to display Taylor addressing a group of scientists and military personnel. Taylor suggested that, since the unknown object responded to specific transmission patterns, they should attempt communication through modulated nuclear detonations in their upper atmosphere. Vexer's entire sensory system contracted in shock. They considered using weapons of mass destruction as a communication method. Not considered, I corrected. Implemented. Human military authorities authorized a sequence of 5 thermonuclear devices to be detonated at precise intervals in their upper atmosphere, creating energy pulses that replicated the mathematical sequence the Vrexara had initially sent. The memory pool showed the detonation's brilliant flashes against Earth atmosphere. No species in consortium records had ever repurposed extinction-level weapons as communication tools. The Vrexara observation team was paralyzed by the implications. Their assessment paradigms had no protocol for a species that would risk planetary habitability to establish contact. I paused, allowing Vexa to process this information before continuing. The Vrexair faced a decision: maintain the deceleration field, despite the human response, or withdraw and report to their central authority. They chose a third option, one that violated all established contact protocols. They decided to accelerate human development in a controlled direction by providing limited technological information, believing they could guide humans toward less volatile development paths. The memory pool displayed the Vrexara seed ship positioning itself to be visible to human observation systems, then transmitting a simplified schematic for a propulsion technology centuries beyond human development. The Vrexara reasoned that providing space travel technology would redirect human innovation toward exploration rather than weaponry. They transmitted the schematic globally, ensuring multiple human nations received it simultaneously to prevent power imbalances. Vexer's appendages twisted in distress. They gave advanced technology to a species that had just demonstrated willingness to detonate nuclear weapons for communication purposes. Yes, I said simply. What happened next fundamentally transformed consortium policies toward pre-contact species for all subsequent cycles. The memory pool displayed human scientific facilities around the planet, where the Vrexeter schematic was being analyzed and implemented with astonishing speed. Humans not only understood the technology but improved upon it. Within 17 Earth months, an unprecedented time frame, they had constructed functioning prototypes. The Vrexeter were initially pleased, believing their experiment in developmental acceleration was succeeding. But then humans made a modification to the propulsion system that the Vrexeter had not anticipated. The pool zoomed in on a human engineering facility where the prototype drive was being tested. William Taylor, now leading one of the implementation teams, suggested that the efficiency of the drive could be dramatically improved by integrating it with human nuclear weapons technology. Instead of using the clean energy source implicit in the Vrexeter design, humans adapted it to harness the explosive power of their most destructive weapons as a propulsion amplifier. The memory pool displayed the modified engine schematics. The humans created what they called a pulse propulsion system, essentially a vessel propelled by directing nuclear explosions. It was crude, dangerously unstable, and produced radioactive contamination in its wake. It was also capable of velocities approaching 10% of light speed, far beyond what the Vrexeter had intended to provide. Vexer's entire form had gone still, respiratory membranes barely moving. They weaponized a peaceful propulsion technology. From the human perspective, they optimized it. I corrected. Within 36 Earth months, they had constructed 3 interplanetary vessels using this technology. Before the Vrexeter could respond, the first human ship left their atmosphere, destined not for exploration but for the precise coordinates of the Vrexeter seed ship. The memory pool showed the human vessel a massive construct bristling with primitive weapon systems, accelerating toward the Vrexeter position. This, I said quietly, is why we maintain the rule of separation. The Vrexator had to summon a battle fleet to contain a single human vessel. The human response to this show of force was what ultimately led to the consortium's eternal quarantine decision. The pool displayed the final image, the human vessel, surrounded by Vrexar ships, transmitting a message that would change galactic policy forever. The human message was simple, I concluded. We know you exist. We know where you are. We are coming, and we will not come alone. The memory pool's surface churned with dark energies as the final historical sequences prepared to transfer. Vexar's neural receptors had dilated to their maximum capacity, his entire form tense with anticipation. The Vrexator battle fleet engaged the human vessel as per standard containment protocol. I continued. Their technology was centuries beyond human capabilities. The engagement should have ended in moments. The pool displayed the confrontation 17 Vrexator ships surrounding the solitary human vessel. The Vrexator transmitted final warnings, offering the humans an opportunity to surrender. The humans responded by detonating a nuclear device inside their own ship. Vexar's bioluminescence flickered in confusion, self-destruction as a first response. That contradicts all rational conflict behaviors. It wasn't self-destruction, I corrected. It was something the consortium had never encountered before. The humans had converted their vessel into what they called a nuclear pulse electromagnetic generator. The detonation created an energy wave that temporarily disabled the Vrexar fleet's communication systems. The pool showed the aftermath. The human ship damaged but operational. The Vrexator vessels drifting in disarray. The humans had correctly intuited that the Vrexator ships would share communication frequencies. With the fleet temporarily isolated from Central Command, the humans transmitted a message simultaneously to the Vrexator homeworld and to over 2,000 stellar coordinates. What was the message? The Sage asked, his voice modulator barely audible. A complete technical analysis of Vrexator shield frequencies, weapons capabilities, and communication protocols, along with the coordinates of the Vrexator homeworld, transmitted to every star system within 200 light-years. Vexar's respiratory membranes fluttered erratically. How could they have possibly acquired such information? They extrapolated it, I said, from minimal observational data. The human vessel had performed a series of small maneuvers, each designed to test different aspects of Vector defensive responses. In the brief interaction before they detonated their device, they had gathered enough information to identify fundamental patterns in Vector technology. The memory pool displayed the scattered transmission signals radiating outward from Earth. The humans called this tactic mutually assured destruction. They couldn't win a direct confrontation, so they ensured that any aggressive action against them would result in catastrophic consequences for their opponent. It was a strategy born from their uniquely adversarial development. Vexator's appendages twisted in contemplation. But the information they transmitted would have been rudimentary at best. The Vexator could have simply eliminated the human homeworld before any recipient could act on the information. The Vexator came to the same conclusion, I acknowledged. They prepared to neutralize Earth entirely. What prevented them was a second message from the humans. This one directed only to the Vexator Central Authority. The pool displayed the message, simple text in the Vexator communication format. The message contained only two elements. First, mathematical proof that humans had correctly deciphered key vulnerabilities in Vexator defensive systems. Second, evidence that humans had already dispatched 6 additional vessels before the first contact, each carrying autonomous weapons designed to attack the Vexator homeworld if Earth's communications ceased. The nutrient mist in our chamber thickened as my stress levels elevated at this memory. These additional ships did not exist, I clarified. The humans were bluffing a concept alien to Vexator cognition. The Vexator, unable to comprehend deliberate deception at this scale, were forced to recalculate their response. They believed a fabrication. Vexa's disbelief was evident in his neural pattern. The humans had included just enough verifiable data to make the fabrication credible. More importantly, they exploited a fundamental gap in Vexa's psychology, the inability to fully comprehend that another species would risk mutual annihilation as a strategic choice. The memory pool shifted to display the Vrexar central authority in emergency session. The Vrexar, for the first time in their history, retreated from a pre-interstellar species. They withdrew their fleet and established an observation perimeter beyond human detection range. They also transmitted an emergency notification to the consortium, requesting immediate intervention. I paused, allowing Vexeter to process this unprecedented historical event. When the consortium assessment team arrived, they found a situation beyond all established protocols. Humans were advancing their technology at exponential rates, incorporating and improving upon the glimpses of Rexidar technology they had observed. Within 5 Earth years, they had developed rudimentary interplanetary capabilities. Within 20, they had established outposts throughout their solar system. The pool displayed the rapid transformation of human civilization, space stations, lunar bases, Martian colonies. The consortium faced a dilemma without precedent. Standard procedure would call for immediate containment of such an aggressively expanding species, but humans had demonstrated a unique psychological trait that made conventional containment dangerous. They had shown they would rather risk mutual destruction than accept subjugation. Vexa's neural patterns registered deepening concern, so the consortium established the quarantine protocol instead. Not immediately, I said. First, the consortium attempted a more sophisticated approach. Rather than confrontation, they deployed what we now call the inversion protocol. The memory pool displayed a new set of consortium vessels taking position in the outer reaches of the human solar system. These vessels began broadcasting a carefully constructed signal designed to be detected by human instruments. A signal containing fragments of advanced scientific knowledge. Across multiple disciplines, the intention was to divert human innovation toward internal development rather than external expansion. Did it succeed? Vexeter asked. It backfired catastrophically, I replied. Humans detected the signal within days. Rather than interpreting it as separate knowledge fragments as intended, they perceived it as an integrated technological framework. Their most brilliant minds, led by descendants of William Taylor, recognized that the fragments, when properly arranged, revealed principles of quantum communication that even the consortium had not fully implemented. The pool showed human scientists working feverishly to decode and apply the information. Within 3 Earth years, humans had developed a form of instantaneous communication that bypassed conventional limitations. They called it quantum entanglement transmission. The consortium had inadvertently provided them with the one technology that would render a spatial quarantine ineffective. Vexa's entire form vibrated with distress. They achieved faster-than-light communication before developing standard interstellar travel. That development sequence violates all known technological progression patterns. Precisely why the consortium's predictive models failed, I confirmed. Humans exhibit what xenopsychologists now call crisis adaptation acceleration. They innovate most rapidly when threatened. Our attempted containment strategies actually accelerated their advancement. The memory pool displayed the next phase. Human quantum signals reaching distant star systems, bypassing the consortium's monitoring network. What happened next transformed galactic politics forever. Humans began transmitting technological information to specific non-consortium species, particularly those under restrictive development treaties. They prioritized contact with species the consortium had deemed potentially destabilizing and shared scientific knowledge without restriction. The pool showed various non-human civilizations suddenly advancing beyond their expected development trajectories, implementing technologies centuries ahead of their natural progression. Within 1 generation, the carefully maintained balance of the consortium's technological hierarchy had been completely undermined. Species that had been dependent on consortium guidance were suddenly developing independent capabilities. The established order began unraveling at its foundations. Vexer's neural pathways pulsed with realization. The humans deliberately destabilized the entire galactic governance structure without ever leaving their solar system. Yes, I said. They recognized something that had eluded the consortium for millennia, that our governance was built upon controlled technological disparity. By simply sharing knowledge freely, humans upended a system that had maintained stability for thousands of cycles. The memory pool displayed the consequence: consortium authority fragmenting as previously subordinate species achieved technological parity. The consortium convened an emergency conclave to address what they termed the human contagion. Multiple containment strategies were proposed, including the complete neutralization of Earth. However, by this point, several former client species had formed alliances with humans through their quantum communication network. Any action against Earth would have triggered widespread conflict. I manipulated the pool's controls, advancing to the next critical phase. And then the humans did something that no predictive model had anticipated. As their position strengthened, as the alliances they'd built gave them genuine leverage on the consortium, they proposed a peaceful integration. The pool displayed the human diplomatic message, a proposal for mutual cooperation and shared governance. The consortium leadership was confounded. Their experience with ascendant species throughout galactic history suggested that humans would demand reparations, territorial concessions, or privileged status. Instead, humans requested only three things: unrestricted access to scientific knowledge, guaranteed non-interference in their development, and a restructuring of the consortium toward what they called democratic representation, a governance system where authority would be distributed proportionally among all member species. Vexer's appendages twisted in confusion. They gained leverage, only to relinquish it. What possible evolutionary advantage would such behavior confer? That, I said, is the fundamental mystery of human psychology that continues to confound consortium xenopsychologists. Humans appear to value systems over dominance, principles over power. When they achieve dominance, they frequently dismantle the very hierarchies that granted them their position. The pool showed the subsequent negotiations, humans refusing special status while insisting on equal representation for all species. The consortium reluctantly agreed to human terms, believing they could gradually reassert control once humans were integrated into existing power structures. They were wrong. Human insistence on transparency and distributed authority rapidly transformed the consortium's internal dynamics. Within 3 cycles, the millennia-old power hierarchy had been fundamentally restructured. I paused, allowing the pool to display the consequences: a transformed galactic governance with species previously marginalized now participating equally. The formal quarantine of Earth was lifted, but replaced with something far more significant: the rule of separation. This rule was not imposed by the consortium upon humans, but by humans upon themselves. The pool displayed the human declaration establishing the rule. Humans recognized something about themselves that the consortium had failed to grasp, that their disruptive potential stemmed not from malice, but from fundamental cognitive differences. They concluded that direct interaction between their civilization and others would inevitably lead to unintended consequences. They offered knowledge exchange and remote alliance, but prohibited physical contact between their species and others. Vexer's neural patterns registered profound confusion. They quarantined themselves after achieving a position of influence. Yes, I confirmed, and they enforced this separation rigorously. When certain species attempted to establish direct contact despite the rule, humans demonstrated that their self-restraint was a choice, not a limitation. The pool displayed a final historical sequence: an unauthorized expedition from the Drell Imperium approaching Earth, then being neutralized by previously undetected human defensive systems. The message humans transmitted to the consortium afterward became the foundation of our current understanding of them. They said, "We restrict ourselves not from fear, but from responsibility. We recognize patterns you cannot see, adapt at speeds you cannot match, and conceptualize threats you cannot imagine. For the safety of all, we will share our knowledge, but not our presence." I deactivated the memory pool, allowing its surface to return to serene stillness. The nutrient mist in our chamber had thinned, responding to the conclusion of the historical transfer. This, Vexer, is why your request to open direct communication channels with humans violates the most fundamental principle of galactic stability. Humans are not contained by our restrictions. They are contained by their own. Vexer remained silent for several moments, his neural processes visibly recalibrating. Finally, he spoke. "But Elder Nithal, if humans imposed this separation themselves, and if they truly value systems over dominance as you've described, wouldn't diplomatic engagement be safe? Their history suggests they seek cooperation, not conquest." I moved closer to my former student, extending my sensory appendages to ensure complete reception of my response. "What you fail to understand is that human cooperation is itself the greatest threat to our existence. Their collaborative impulse is inextricably linked to their crisis adaptation. In creating alliances, they transform other species in unpredictable ways." I gestured toward the observation portal where the distant stars gleamed against the void. "The current galactic equilibrium exists not because humans were defeated or contained, but because they chose restraint. Their self-imposed isolation is the foundation upon which our governance functions. Opening direct communication would signal that we believe ourselves capable of managing the consequences of human interaction. The historical record demonstrates conclusively that we are not." Vexer's bioluminescence dimmed as the implications became clear. "Then the rule of separation protects us from ourselves as much as from humans." "Precisely," I said. "And now I must ask you something disturbing, Vexe. You came to me with a proposal to violate the most critical protocol in consortium governance. I must know, did someone suggest this course of action to you?" Vexer's neural patterns registered surprise, then hesitation. "I received an anonymous data packet containing fragmented information about human civilization, information beyond standard academic archives. The sender implied that direct contact with humans could elevate our species' status within the consortium." My respiratory membranes contracted in alarm. "This is precisely how it begins, Vexer. What you've described matches exactly the pattern of human first contact methodology. They identify ambitious individuals within hierarchical structures, provide them with information unavailable to their peers, and allow them to initiate contact under the illusion of personal discovery. I activated the chamber's security protocols, sealing our communication from external monitoring. Listen carefully, Vaisara. The rule of separation may already have been breached. Your receipt of this data packet suggests human quantum communication has penetrated our networks further than we realized. You must report this to the Consortium Security Council immediately." Vex's entire form had gone still with shock. "Are you suggesting humans are attempting to infiltrate the consortium?" "I am suggesting something far more disturbing," I replied. "I believe humans have concluded that their self-imposed isolation has reached its effective limit. After 2 centuries of separation, they may have determined that the time has come to directly influence galactic development once again." I moved to the data interface, extracting a security authorization code, known only to consortium historians. "Take this to the council. Tell them that Elder Historian Nithal has authenticated a potential human engagement scenario. Tell them." I hesitated, my neural patterns distressed by the implications. "Tell them that the stars are no longer silent." Vexer accepted their authorization, his appendages trembling slightly. "Elder Nithal, if humans are indeed reaching out after centuries of silence, what does this mean for the consortium?" "It means," I said, my voice modulator dropping to its lowest frequency, that everything we have built, everything we believe about our place in the cosmos, is about to change. Humans do not break their own rules without profound cause. If they are initiating contact now, they have perceived something on the galactic horizon that we cannot see, a threat or opportunity beyond our comprehension. I guided Vexa toward the chamber entrance, my final words carrying the weight of historical certainty. Remember this, Vexa. We fear humans not because they are conquerors, but because they are catalysts. Where they walk, transformation follows, even in their absence. Their ideas spread like quantum possibilities, redefining what species believe possible. And now, after centuries of silence, they appear to be walking once more.